Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC Stargirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with an interesting conversation that Courtney eventually has. Well, first with Nurse Love, and then eventually Mr. Bones himself, where she's kind of been under the impression that this is a bad place. What was also interesting too is when she was like, Stargirl, I'm like, wait, she just super casually dropped that, and Courtney didn't seem too shocked by it, but to be fair, she was under the impression these were the people keeping a watch on them the entire time, which we do ultimately find out they weren't, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. So, but she just casually drops it. So I was like, right. They explained it later on. I was like, oh yeah, we do our research, so we're good. But she talks to Mr. Bone, and we find out, oh, Helix isn't like the bad thing that you would kind of think it was. It's like, oh, this is a very bad place. It was like, no, it helps people who have powers and things that are outside of their control, because it's like, right. He uses the example of the current JSA. It's like, you guys don't have powers that are so like, right. Courtney, like, all she has to do to remove herself from her powers are the staff. It's not like an ingrained part of them. It's something they're just not like stuck with. It's like she doesn't have the staff. She doesn't have her powers. Yolanda takes off the suit. She doesn't have her powers. Rick doesn't use the hourglass. He doesn't have his powers. And even Beth's is like technologically based, but even then it's still like, yeah, the goggles, she's not Dr. Midnight. So it is a situation of, we have very different circumstances. He was born with like his like translucent skin, and he has a cyanide touch, and ended up killing his own mom because of birth. Like because it was like some experiment that happened to his mom when she was pregnant with him. And he even says like, Nurse Love is the one who saved me, you know? And that's what Helix is. He finds people who are like him, who have powers that are just so ingrained in them that like there is no separating them from it. Like Todd and Jenny's circumstances, that power is within them. And, you know, Jenny's had her issues in the past, but it's like Todd in particular, if that power in him ever let loose, it drown out the entire world, consume the entire world in darkness. And we see some other people kind of thrown in there. There were some names, which I'm going to do some quick Googling. Okay, so some of the names were like Tao Jones. Basically, her power is to deflect any form of energy directed at her. The other one was, apparently her thing is absorbing and rechanneling electricity. There was a third one, but I don't remember what their name is. Obviously, this whole Helix thing is something from the comics, but they are shifting it a little bit, because at least like Nurse Love is being treated as not a bad person, because it seems like, I mean, and this, because some of the pictures I saw for these seem like they're like old school. Like, I don't know if they're necessarily like maybe silver or gold age characters, but they seem like, I mean, at least from like the panels I saw and just the designs, they seem like they're probably characters from like the 70s or 80s, maybe in the comics. But yeah, it does seem like this all kind of fits within the realm of the comics. So like, part of me was almost wondering too, I'm like, this doesn't have anything to do with like Diggle's Justice You. I wouldn't think, because I mean, it has to do with like college students, so I don't know. I mean, also this is Earth 2, it also depends on what Earth they're setting Justice You in, because obviously, well, you've seen, because they're setting up stuff on Superman and Lois, but that's on a different Earth. But it's also continuous with just like John's story and other Earths. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, because it seems like this is going to be a completely unrelated thing. But I know Justice You was supposed to be Diggle taking in like metahumans, and like that's the whole thing. Where like everyone here is like related to Helix is a metahuman. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting, because I was like, because at least Tao Jones, her name seemed familiar, but looking into the character, the tiny bit of the Googling I did, I'm like, I don't think I know that character. The name seemed familiar for some reason. Either way, putting all that aside, like I said, that conversation Courtney had with Mr. Bones, he's like, right, I'm just trying to help these kids out, and I'm teaching them how to basically isolate themselves from the world. But for Courtney, it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, isolating yourself, like, if you're going to live, like, we shouldn't be alone in this world. Like, the whole point of life is connecting with people, and you isolate people from that. Like, I mean, what's the point then, you know? So she believes that Jenny and Todd, is like, if you can get them together, like, they complement each other. It's like, yes, the moment Jenny's ring got infected last season, it had an adverse effect on Todd, because the moment Jenny got her ring, as we saw last episode, the moment she got her ring, it activated what was happening in Todd. They don't really, even he doesn't really understand. It's just like, right, the Shade doesn't really understand. He's like, right, she got the light and somehow he got the darkness. I don't know whether it's specifically Alan's circumstances, or maybe it's like, once again, maybe like a metahuman genetic thing in them in conjunction with their dad being a Green Lantern. It like, because that's why I'm like, I know there are multiple different rings representing different things, but I'm like, do all the rings actually have a shadow side to them? And maybe that's just what happens in this instance of like, this is like Todd's circumstances is the flip side to a Green Lantern ring, or maybe it's just Green Lantern rings that have this, or maybe all the Lantern rings have it, or maybe this is something specifically they're doing for the show. I don't know. That's such an interesting thing. Like, we get no answers about, but like, because everyone's getting treated like a metahuman, so I think it is probably like a mutation with like the Green Lanternism plus what's already kind of maybe inside of their DNA, So maybe it's a late mutant gene from their mom or something, or maybe it's in conjunction with their dad. Maybe their dad maybe he had mutant genes plus he happened to be a Green Lantern too. I don't know. Pure speculation on my part. I'm sure there are people who are a lot more well versed in the comics who can probably give a more definitive answer on what like that the show didn't necessarily give. But either way, Courtney believes if you can bring them together, it could resolve a lot of issues. For one, Pat and the Shade being in the Shadow Realm. And so they're willing to give Courtney a shot at trying this. And for her, she wants Jenny to reach out to her brother just like they reached out to Jenny. But she's like, what if I hurt him or something? It's like, do you want to hurt him? It's like, no, you want to save your brother. Just believe in that, have faith in that feeling. And so she reached out to her brother. And basically during the process, it's like, right, she believes that her dad gave her this ring because he knew it would bring them back together when it was all said and done. And so the darkness that was in the ring from last season is now sucked up into Todd because he can handle it without it kind of coming in conflict with the ring. I guess it was almost like this darkness in it that kind of imbalanced it, but now like Todd and Jenny are kind of in this equilibrium now. Like they're kind of like, they kind of balance each other out in that regard. So luckily Todd is back to normal. Everything works out. We'll circle back to we'll jump into everything with Pat and the Shade really quickly. With that all said, and like now they're trapped in the Shadow Realm because even the Shade can't leave that place, even though he knows the ins and outs of it. He's like, right, I'm the reason why Courtney got out. I was like, yes, you're the reason why she got out, but Courtney survived because she faced whatever like she had to face in here, because the Shade can't get out as long as like until Jenny fixes her circumstances with her ring or just her powers in general, and her and Todd, like they can't leave. And so they're confronted with their past. At first, like he goes to the diner and it turns out the gambler's there. I was like, wait, is this an actual gambler? It's like, no, he's dead. Like, how would he end up here? So he's representing of how the Shade actually kind of feels a little bad that he didn't accept his apology. Or at least, once again, it doesn't necessarily have to be close to what you feel necessarily, but it can take what is there and manipulate it to manipulate you. So it's like, right. And even saying like, oh, the same thing with your sister. Like when she was dying, what did you say to her? And it's that sad thing. He never did. He ran away from his sister when she was dying. He wasn't there when she died, and she sadly died alone. She was like, please don't let me die alone like Dad did. And I think it was just him running away because he probably thought like, no, my sister's better off without me. With what I'm going through and everything, I can't help her, and just losing someone is a heavy thing. There's no like there's no like soft blowing that to some extent, I think. Maybe there's ways to like mitigate it, but at the time, he wasn't really equipped to handle that, and so he kind of ran away because he didn't want to have to face it at the time. And Pat ends up running into his dad, which that actor, I know him. I've never seen the show a lot, but I've seen bits and pieces here and there, but I know him from like the Closer / Major Crimes. Obviously, I know Major Crimes is like a spinoff of it, but yeah, he's one of the detectives in that. And he's Pat's dad. And it seems like Pat has a very, very complicated relationship with his dad. And I love how they contrast that with him and Mike. Him and Mike do have a complicated relationship, and the fact is that Mike wants a chance over and over again to try and prove himself. I mean, this entire season's about it's more so about him. He's kind of dragging Jakeem along, but it's about like, no. Mike wants to prove himself because he feels like such an outsider to the JSA. I mean, that's been a part of him ever since he found out about the JSA. It's like he wanted to be a part of it, and it's all of season 2, and even this season, he feels like such an outsider. Like, no, I can contribute more. I can be a part of this if you give me a chance. And his dad being like, right, I kind of didn't see you, and you did everything you could to get my attention, Pat. Your son is doing the exact same thing. And I think for Pat, it breaks his heart to realize, like, because he's recognized some of that because Barbara's kind of pointed it out. But for him to be like, I never want my son to kind of feel like I felt. Because even his dad is like, oh, you like eventually your son's going to hate you like you hated me. But he's like, no, I didn't hate my dad. And that's hard to say whether Pat's really being honest with himself. You know, whether because he might not be able to actually admit to himself how he really feels, because his dad put a lot on him. His dad was hard on him, and his mom left because she was like, oh, she had it because she was always more coddling towards him in the regard of like, right, she didn't want her feelings to get hurt, but his dad's almost kind of like feelings, because Pat's a little more in touch with his feelings than, you know, most people. I mean, I think it is that generational thing too. His dad's probably like no, you got hurt feelings. Ew, no, you suck it up and you bury it deep, which that leads to a whole long list of issues. But it is like that upbringing that Pat had to deal with, and he says he doesn't hate his dad, but that's why I'm really curious whether or not that's actually the case or not, whether he's just not even admitting it to himself. Because now I think because by the end you see it really hit a chord with him, because now he's like, you know, after everything he saw in the Shadowlands, it got him thinking, you know. And even Barbara tried to throw like the whole Courtney thing, because he feels like, because I think especially after like last episode or whatever, when not last episode but the episode before last, that Sylvester was the one who was able to reach out to Courtney, was there for her when he couldn't be, you know. And so maybe he kind of feels like he's kind of falling a little short. It's like, right, both, because like Courtney and Mike are his, you know. It's like, right, she might be your stepdaughter, but she's just as much your daughter as much as Mike is your son. And especially when we found out the sad truth about, like, because that has not been a conversation about Mike's actual mom. Like, I want to say last season was the first time I mean, obviously we saw her in the show, but I think that's the first time she ever came up. And Mike, it's like, right, Mike kind of feels abandoned because, like, you know, he was young when his mom left, but apparently, like, she had her drug issues and she was strung out, apparently left him at a soup kitchen. Pat took her and moved out, and it's like, right, you wanted him to kind of put his mom in the past and kind of move on, because he probably doesn't talk about like Mike's mom a lot, because he probably has like a lot of questions. And I think it's heartbreaking, but I think there's almost an element of there could be some camaraderie between Courtney and Mike, because they have very complicated feelings with a certain family member. Like, right, Courtney has the issues with her dad, Mike has issues with his mom, but I think in Courtney's case, she'll probably think, well, Mike's mom had an excuse. Hers was drugs. That's one thing. Maybe she thought she was leaving for his benefit, that it was good in the long run. But then, like, you know, her dad is like, what is his actual excuse? So I that's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, especially how Pat handles that going forward, now being confronted with that, because it's like, yeah, it might have been the Shadowland messing with me, but some of that was true. He even said, like, no, this isn't the Shadowland twisting anything when it came to my dad. My dad said those exact words to me. So that is going to be interesting to see how Pat handles that going forward. It's a lot for him to ultimately end up processing. So, but like I said, in the end, it all, you know, ultimately ends up working out. And they're able to escape, you know, thanks to Courtney. And I do love the beauty of that. It's like, right, she handled this as Courtney Whitmore. She didn't do it as Stargirl. That is, right, who you are at your core. Even without the staff, you were still this powerful person. That it's like, right, what you did for Rick, Beth, Yolanda, you did that not just as Stargirl, but as Courtney, because without Courtney Whitmore, there is no Stargirl. Because yeah, Stargirl's got the powers, but without the good nature, the hope, the good person that Courtney is, the person willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, trying to help people, without that core aspect, Stargirl wouldn't be who she is. So it's like, right, it takes both sides to kind of make Courtney / Stargirl who she is, you know? And I thought that was kind of beautiful in the end. And even, but it turns out, yeah, like no one at that place is being held. Even, they can kind of leave whenever they want to, but they stay there for the sake of, yeah, this is where we're comfortable. Powers are not like well out of control and stuff like that. They're able to kind of rein themselves in. And so I love Courtney being like, yeah, oh, wait, people can leave here? Yeah, but still, this isn't the way you kind of go about things, like isolating people the way you are. So, and even Mr. Bones is like, maybe Courtney Whitmore is right. Maybe it's time we form a team of our own, which, like I was talking about before, like Helix is a team in the comics and stuff. So, but we have the Shade. I love that conversation Pat has with him. It's like, right, this is redemption. He's like, oh, why am I need redemption? It's like, you helped with the... He's like, I didn't actually kill anyone. It's like, doesn't matter if you didn't directly kill anyone. You are still associated with the ISA's attack on the JSA, and those 2 orphans are over there. You know, you want forgiveness, you want redemption. This is how you do it. You don't just not doing bad things isn't enough. You need to also do good things to balance it out. So, you know, just being fine and not like doing bad things, that's okay. But if you really want redemption, do good. So it's like, you are the one person that could teach Todd to control the darkness. And especially for him, it's like, for so long, the Shade was the only one who had those circumstances. So it's like, fine. And Jenny's kind of like hesitant to trust him, but it's like, hey, we can work together, and we can do the whole situation of you taking us to New York, because he's got to meet the Sandman's son, because it's like, right, they dream about people needing help. And I'm curious, I wouldn't think so. Would that be, because I know like there is overlap because of where Sandman, as in like Dream Morpheus Sandman, started off in the comics, and obviously there is blend in certain regards, especially early on. There was that like crossover between that and DC, because it was actually set in the DC universe and stuff. But, you know, obviously for the Netflix show, they had it for licensing purposes. They kind of had to stray away from some of that. But I am curious. Would that be like Sandman back when I doubt it is. I think it probably is like a completely different character. So the one that the show, so it is a thing of, yes, they share the same name, but they are very different characters over the course of DC Comics. So it's not even necessarily like the same Dream Morpheus Sandman, but obviously, like, if you look at the Wikipedia page, it brings up all the different people who've used that name. So obviously, apparently this character, the Wesley Dodds version, was more of a pulp detective or something like that in the comics. Interesting little fact I was reading. Apparently, he's ranked among the top 200 comic book characters of all time, and he's the oldest superhero in terms of continuity to appear on that list, which I thought was kind of interesting. Because apparently, like, the character disappeared for a while, but then was kind of revived in the 90s or something like that, in the more noir, pulp, detective type of aspect. Either way, I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, probably the last, I mean, there's always room if they need to throw the Shade, Todd, and Jenny back into the story. But it's like, right, they're out there in the universe doing their thing. But it also answers, once again, I figured as much the way we were setting it up. I was like, does this have anything to do with Mr. Bones? It's like, nope. The Helix thing was its own thing, because like they had no, once again, no reason to spy on Courtney. And it was like, we do our research. We have no reason to kind of spy on you. So I even love Pat being like, yo, did you ever teach like math, 5th grade math in the early 1980s in Nebraska? And whatever. She's like, I don't like your attitude, Mr. Dugan. He was like, I knew it was you, or something like that. I love that little bit. But yeah, now because of this, it did help prepare Courtney to do what she believes she needs to do when she gets home to fix things between her, Yolanda, Rick, and Beth. But obviously, once again, the big question is, well, who is the person that's been spying on them then? And what interested me the most, like, out of any TV the person broke, they specifically broke the one where Rick was kind of staring at. So it's like, I don't know whether this person has specific beef with like our man in general, maybe not just Rick's dad, but maybe specifically Rick himself, or I'm curious about that. Or is it just because, like, right, that is the first video they probably saw the moment. It's like, oh, they're on to me. They know, like, what's up, you know? So whoever it is like sounds growly like a monster, but we still don't know. They're keeping that like very close to the vest on who that really is. So once again, if you know, don't say anything. Obviously, whether it's like a DC thing like from the comics, you know it has to be this person because of X, Y, and Z, or you just seen something that's already very real of what it is. Obviously, I don't want to know, so please don't spoil that. But also, like, you know, I don't want to take the chance that you might reveal that information and someone else might be watching this in the future and like, oh, like, say you watched the future episode, like, well after this season's over and you come back to comment. Just don't. Just because, you know, because people will discover stuff at different points in time. And just a year from now, I don't want someone accidentally reading the comments of this and it spoils it as they're, like, trying to, like, make their way through the season or something. So just keep that in mind. That's all I ask. But I am very, very, very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.